Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Megan Kiskadden. I'm the executive director here and on the boards. Thank you for coming. Woo. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And also, thank you so much to Christy and NCCAkron for putting on this event and also for publishing Artists on Creative Administration. I read it all the time. Yeah. And I'm excited to have so many of the artists here today. Christy. And also, as you probably know, Miguel Gutierrez's show is tonight at 8. Come through. You'll probably say that too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. We actually go back to San Francisco dance streets together, but that was a totally unsolicited plug for the book, and so I know it came from a genuine place and really appreciate hearing from so many people that we've been in the trenches together, that maybe we never met before, and then they come up and they say, oh my gosh, I'm reading the book, and you're like, it feels like we're having a very intimate experience and yet meeting for the first time because so much of ourselves are in these pages. Should probably elaborate a little bit more. My name's Christy Bolingbroke. I'm the Executive Artistic Director for the National Center for Choreography in Akron, Ohio. I use she, her pronouns, and I am so grateful and excited to be with the Seattle community today. One of the things at NCCAkron is one of 2 national centers for choreography in the country is we're a research and development space for new work in dance. We're here to advocate for the creative process and dance as essential parts of culture in this country. And we're here to strengthen the national dance ecosystem. And so one of the things that I'm most proud of inside of our book is that there are 30 contributing authors. And these aren't just New York stories. These are stories from across the country because it is a different opportunity, a different challenge, and a different reality, and a different definition of success to make work in Nashville or Miami or here in Seattle. And so why not have stories from the last 2 decades about the realities of making work today instead of perpetuating the definitions of success and what dance making is from last century. And yes, I know we're not used to always applauding in the middle of dance performances, but you can do that at a book event. Okay. So, and especially pleased that as we take this book on the road, that we get to come to our editor and contributing author, Tanya Lockyer's hometown. Oh, I think some people know you. Yes, as a fierce arts leader here in Seattle who really helped us throughout this process. I had a board member at NCCAkron that said, you know, there's a hypothesis that for every minute on stage, that's estimated as at least 8 hours of rehearsal. And I don't know that we've ever taken the time to clock that, but if that is one formula, then I will be happy to share with you from first conceiving the book and then commissioning the essays and then submitting the manuscript and work. We're talking about 3+ years of people's lives. And so it felt so exciting to be able to say, look, we have something tangible in our hands. And the best part of this is that just because the book is quote unquote done doesn't mean that it is finished. It is a conversation starter. And that's one of the reasons that we do these events called Making Moves. And so with that in mind, I wanted to let you know a little bit about the Creative Admin Research Program, or CAR, which is some of what the book was birthed from. And CAR has a very easy premise. It is based on the idea that there isn't one way of making art, so there shouldn't be just one way of doing the business of art. What's come up in this research that I often like to remind us is that 501c3 or a nonprofit organization distinction is a tax distinction. It is not a single business model. And so they may take away tax-exempt protections and may be threatened, but we are still artists, and we are still culture workers, and we will lean on our core creativity as currency to find a way to continue forward with or without the tax distinction. So by not being limited to that, one of the other questions that often comes up from artists is like, how can I just find a way to be more sustainable? And I want to offer that is inherently precarious as well, as if there is a single formula to be 50% earned and 50% contributed when we are operating in environments largely outside of our control. So another car artist, Raja Feather Kelly, offered maybe what we're looking for is how can we make this be more realistic that we could have longevity as artists? And that's really interesting to me, to think about how we can be more intentional with our choices, that we can adapt instead of merely react, that we can continue to evolve and emerge. And that, like this book, the conversation is just getting started. And we're going to hear today from more people about continuing this practice. Thank you all so much for coming out today. We'll be hearing more about how you can get your own copy of the book as well before you leave. But first up, I would like to bring up one of our contributing authors from New York City and Los Angeles, California, Miguel Gutierrez.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone, for all the work that you've done to make this happen. I'll be reading from the works of, no. It's hard not to. For my contribution to the book, I submitted a transcript from a podcast that I created, I don't even remember now, it's like 4 years ago, called Are You For Sale, which you can still look at and listen to. It's called at areyouforsale.podcast.com, which looks at the ethical entanglements between money and art making. And there were 6 episodes. I was planning to do more, but then life got really complicated, and it's so much work to put those things together, and it was traumatizing to think that much about money. But I'm going to read from the second part of the transcript, where I spoke with several different artists about how they fund their work. In this case, it was American artists. I also did an episode where I focused on non-US based artists, but in this case, it was Rosie Herrera, who is a choreographer based in Miami, Cynthia Oliver, who used to live in New York and has for a long time been based in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, as a professor at U of I and also as a choreographer, and Amara Tabor-Smith, who is a Bay Area artist who teaches at Stanford, and also Antonio Ramos, who's a Puerto Rican choreographer who's been living and working in New York for a really long time and is a good friend of mine. So I'm going to be playing these different parts, but I'm not going to do voices. I'm just going to say, this is so-and-so speaking. This starts with me. I asked the artists how they manage their expectations once they apply for a grant and how they deal with rejection. This is Rosie. Kind of such a fucked up thing to say, but the truth is I just never expect it. Just assume that it's not going to happen. And not because I've been rejected so many times. I'm just so used to working outside of that grant system that I'm making or dreaming in a different way. This is Cynthia Oliver. To this day, I never anticipate that I'm going to get something, and maybe being a young dancer and auditioning teaches you not to get overconfident. Because of the amount of rejection that dancers get early on in their careers or ongoing in their careers, there's never an expectation. There's of course the hope that I will get it because I'm also not a prolific artist. I'm not one of those people who does a new work every year. That's not how my head works or my life works. So when I have the inspiration and feel strongly about doing something, then I'm hoping that that connects with whatever panels are operating at the time, because that's the other reality of depending on the panel, you may or may not be the selected artists. I never expect. The other thing is I've always thought of myself, and I say this to the US artists people, I've always thought of myself as like a B artist, right? So there's like the A-listers in film, and then there's like B-listers, and then the C-listers and all that. And I always thought of myself as, B or even C-level artist. And I was okay. I reconciled myself with I'm not going to be one of those people. And they are, they absolutely deserve where they are. But I'm just going to keep toiling away at what I do. There's an audience that loves my work, and I'm happy to see them. They seem to be happy to see me when I do something, and I'm fine with that. It works in my life in a fine way. The other part of that was that I also elected not to pursue a 501c3 status. I had conversations with a number of people about it because there are certain funding opportunities for folks who choose to do that the others don't have. As an independent artist, you cannot apply for some things if you don't have that status. But I chose to do that because I did not want to be a business, an official business. I didn't want to have a board that I had to answer to. I didn't want to have workers' compensation that I had to figure out how to pay for even when we're not working. There are all these complications that I didn't want to have so that when I'm not making work, I could just let myself rest and recover and regenerate and think toward the future work. This is me. And finally, at the end of the day, and the end of each of my conversations with the artists, Rosie, Cynthia, Amara, and Antonio, I asked them what they wished were different, what sort of changes they would like to see in terms of funding. This is Rosie. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a way to support an artist's life versus going piece by piece? It's like, constantly like on a hamster wheel, trying to prove that you are still relevant or that you have something to say when that has been clear. Miami has wonderful, wonderful training programs. We produce phenomenal artists. I just like the work here better than everybody else. The work being made here, the dancing that's happening here is so amazing, but we don't necessarily have the best track record for keeping artists here. And when I look over time, who stays and who doesn't stay, and what's the price that they pay, and who has access to continue to dance full-time or continue to make work full-time, it's very challenging, and those statistics are pretty frickin' bleak, So a lot of artists leave, and more sad than that, a lot of artists struggle with having families, and the choices that have to be made there. When you have a family, you have to support a family, and what does that do to your career as a dancer? So I think to myself, man, wouldn't it be cool if those artists that are making amazing work and that are checking all the lists, getting the national recognition, doing the work with the community, diverse, beautiful ensembles of people working for them, creating jobs, had support to stay? What if it was the bigger organizations that were like, here's a fund that you can apply to buy a freaking house. Here's a fund that you can apply to support the work of touring mothers so that artists can stay, artists that are amazing artists can live. And I'm not even saying live well. I'm just saying live in this place and still be able to make work. And this is coming from the most privileged, probably, choreographer in Miami, who's probably getting the most support and the most funding and the most national recognition. And I'm still struggling to make my life and still, obviously have that. I don't know if you've had this, every 6 months you're like, will I ever have a family? Could I ever have a home? Is the price of this life a little too high? This is Cynthia. One of the things for me has been that I feel like there was a flash moment when a number of the powers that be realized that it wasn't that I was failing at imitating white artists' aesthetics, it was that I actually had another set of values and aesthetics at play. And I think that moment was key. And so if that realization happened much sooner in the funding community, perhaps there would have been a different way of thinking about what people are doing as opposed to presuming it from a deficit, a place of deficit. Oh, these artists, they're not as good creatively or aesthetically, as opposed to what are the aesthetics that they're operating from? This is Amara. There's enough money for all of us to get what we need. There's enough. It's just that we're not getting it. There's enough money for everybody to get what they need. Everybody. And so a friend and curator and art person, Ashara Ekunayo, she says artists are first responders. And I think that artists can perform a kind of first response in terms of, responding artistically to whatever's going on. If we're the forward thinkers, if we are part of the visionary team of people that are imagining what it could be, then let us, listen to us. Listen and believe us when we say, believe that this work, believe that all of our work is important. Believe that art is really, it is necessary. We have never been without art. So nobody knows, oh, could you live without art? You've never had to. You've never had to. Value artists and pay us. Pay all of us. Even the art that you don't like. Pay those artists. Because, what we like it's subjective. It's so individual. And so there should be room for all of it. This is Antonio. We should all get something out of the pot. My fantasy is that we can all receive a portion enough to survive in this, especially in times like this. This is Miguel. In the last few years, Antonio has been traveling to Peru to study plant medicine at a spiritual center run by an indigenous family. And this is Antonio closing out the episode. At the end, we're all fucking connected and we forget about this. And I feel like this is one of the things that I have learned from the indigenous people and from their beliefs. It's like if you go into a forest, the forest is connected with all of the trees that are there. The roots and the microorganisms are all connected to themselves. And when something happens to one of them is either dying or has a disease or has anything, they actually bring nutrients to that tree, and they support the life of that particular tree. And also they send information to the forest, like to tell them, yo, this tree is suffering from this. Let's help them, but also let's help keep them alive. And I just feel like we have kind of forgotten about that within all communities. Like it doesn't matter, gender and race and color, shapes. Like I feel we all deserve to be supported by each other, and we forgot that.
I'm sorry, was the performance happening tonight, or did it just happen now? If you wanted to see Miguel perform, this was your chance. Yes. Thank you. And I have to make a confession that for my first question, I'm actually cheating off of you. I loved a panel that you led with the National Performance Network during the height of the pandemic. And it was in the throes of you producing your podcast. And I don't remember everyone who was on the panel, but I remember Jamil Kasoko was on the panel, Hope Moore. Anyone else we want to name while we're trying to be correct?
Those are the people I remember.
Okay. So we can correct that later. But I love that the first question, I might be paraphrasing here, but it stuck with me, was what is your first money memory related to your art making?
I think probably the first memory that's tied to money and art making is my parents freaking out that I wanted to be an artist. And my parents are immigrants from South America, and so they had no context for the idea that this could be a profession, this could be a way of earning a living. So I think my first relationship to money was this idea of the scarcity, like this idea that it was always going to be scarce, that the choice of this profession was a foolish decision economically, which it is, and you know, yeah. So I think it was tied to that, and conversely, like my reaction, which was like, "I'll show you," you know, it was like that, probably that childhood stuff, yeah.
It and was alluded to in the excerpt that you read as well, the price of this life. And I led a different conversation with a group of Northeast Ohio choreographers last summer that we were talking about a company that had decided to close after 25 years with a brilliant ending rather than a slow fade to black. And what we realized in talking to generations of makers is that everyone who had been doing this work for 20 years or more, out of the 9 of them, I believe, only one had decided to have a family. But then for everyone in the second panel who had been doing this for 19 years-ish or less, almost all 12 of them had children. And so that to me is one of the challenges in navigating this field, is that we may be saying like, how do I make it sustainable, or how do I want to tour? But because of the unique circumstances and when people stepped into this work, that might mean a different definition of what success looks like, a different reality. Are you unlearning the starving artist scarcity mindset, or are you coming in going, wait a minute, I've seen all of these professors, and I'm thinking certainly when I entered college in the 90s, there were a lot of artists who were stepping into higher ed and teaching and getting a full-time position so that they could also make work, and it was seen as research. But you've had your own sort of circuitous route through higher ed and academia, and this is some newer developments since you wrote your essay too. How would you like to catch us up on your relationship to higher ed? We have to tell the stories, otherwise no one else will know how we did it.
No, I make that face because I think higher ed is a tough place right now, and I teach at UCLA, which is a really tough place right now. It's the way it's treating students, the way it's dealing with the complete suppression of speech around Palestine, the way it's completely shutting down even the mention of the word or the gathering of students has been so deeply upsetting as a faculty member to sort of see that. And it's a typical situation where you feel like in the daytime with students, you're teaching them like critical thinking skills and, self-determination, and then outside of the classroom, they're being suppressed by this like corporate, fascistic, like what feels oligarchical regime, which is, akin to pretty much the world that we're living in, or the country. So it's like these fears of aping things, and I avoided higher ed for as long as I possibly could get away with in terms of a job, because I knew this. I kind of felt it deep. I was like, I don't know, that place. But when the pandemic hit, I had a gig at Princeton, and because I had that gig, I had an income for a year because all of my performing opportunities collapsed, and that became a whole negotiation and argument, and I was able to retrieve some of the fees, but I was like, I wasn't, I'm not a spring chicken, and I was like, okay, note to self, I have a job at Princeton that will pay for my life for this first year of the pandemic. Like, okay, that was like, I don't know if in 10 years from now I have the luxury, or I don't know if luxury is the right word, I don't know if I could sustain the level of financial precarity that I have somehow navigated for the 30 years prior. So it's been this experience of working in a system that like I managed to like hop, like it was like, like dodgeball for 30 years. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing the thing that like literally everyone else, like almost everyone else in the world has to deal with, like a job they don't like. At a corporation that they hate. So I feel like I'm having that experience now. In terms of the navigation of academia beforehand, that's just like, was just my weird story. But, I think also there's not a great history of choreographers who get jobs at universities who then continue to make thriving work, or that the field perceives them as thriving artists. I always feel like the field has all these like weird sort of like energies, and it's like you get a really big grant, people are like, okay, you're good, we're done with you. Or you do like a show once at a venue, they're like, okay, we've shown your work, and it's like, you'll show it again, right? Like there's like these ways in which we kind of like cap people's ambitions or possibilities, and partly because there are so many people in the field, so many people who are deserving, and half time remaining, and and because it's just like, there's a weird kind of quite low ceiling for our perception of how far people can go in this field. And so I feel like when people get university jobs, sometimes it's a similar thing where like, okay, you're good, now you're just this identity. So I feel like since I got the job, I've been fighting to maintain, mostly for myself, honestly, a relationship to my identity as an artist first and foremost, because that is where I receive and access the most amount of joy and excitement. And I love my students. I'm really grateful for the department I work inside of, being with great colleagues, but I genuinely, just to be honest, I really hate the system that I'm inside of, and I think the UC is an exploitative system.
And it's like the further you get into it, the more that you're sort of enmeshed inside of that, because to even get those jobs as the field is quote unquote professionalized more. Like I remember a time in the 90s where if you had been a working artist, they would say, oh, okay, great. You don't have to get an undergraduate degree. You have proof of this experience and research, and they would put them on a tenure track. I don't think those opportunities, are as around anymore. And so then the buy-in that's been required of artists to pursue has, I think, done what you've said as far as like eclipsing people's identity as artists because of the hoop jumping that they were doing. And I would imagine it's hard to just say, okay, I'm just going to give it up after you've put so much of that work in too.
Yeah, I mean, it is strange. I got the job. I mean, I didn't have an advanced degree when I got the job. I happened to be in the middle of a process of getting an MFA. Oh, that's my laundry. dry as them.
Multitasking.
Sorry. Yeah, it's a weird system. It's kind of a pyramid scheme. It's like get an MFA so you can work at a university to confer MFAs on others. It's like, I don't think it's exact. I mean, I'm not that cynical about it because I see the power of what that degree can be for students, and I also really value that relationship that develops with students. Like again, I'm trying to keep it super local because in that experience, I can be of service to someone. So I don't think that that's useless, but it does feel very dicey to know what is it that we're launching people out into, what kind of world are we launching people into, especially when the world is changing so quickly, and the model, I mean, I just have been a hustler since the start. Like, I'm just a hustler. I will take the fucking gig, I will figure it out, I will work the hours, I'll write the grants, I'm just like, that's what I am, and also just what I had to become. And I respect the generation that's saying like, whoa, let's take a fucking break from capitalist pressure. And I'm like still Gen X, like child of immigrants, like gotta work, like it's like Saturday morning, I should be writing, like, and it's like that thing of like, just like find rest. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I
mean, that's what our generation has to learn, differently in that way.
And because I know that I am reproducing some of the most fucked up aspects of the system. At the same time, it's hard because I find a lot of joy in work. And I honestly also just find purpose in it. And without purpose or a piece or rehearsal to go to, I spin out very quickly and kind of untether from reality pretty quickly.
I don't want to gloss over what you were talking about, some of the like positive, the value of the staying local, and that maybe one of the things, particularly in this work that is very hard, but there is a community inside of academia, in whether it's with the students that get to find each other, the students that get to work with esteemed faculty and artists, and then if there is the longevity over time. Speaking personally, I then now am an adult at the table and working with people who have been my mentors, and that to me is interesting to experience. But I don't know how we can sort of reassure people without perpetuating the harmful practices, to say like, just stick it out, you'll be okay.
Yeah, I mean, code switching is part of the life that we live, and I think I try to convey to students like, these are the rules here. Don't worry, like you can determine things outside of here, but there will be other rules. So also don't fool yourself. Like, for the ones who are just like, fuck this place, and then I'm like, okay, girl, get ready. Like, guess what? Institution is not like, this is not the only institution you'll ever have to interact with.
Well, and even as we talk about like higher ed or academia, at one university will have its own brand of dysfunction that could be different from another university's dysfunction.
But I think one thing I just wanted to mention, make sure I said, it's like the university does like feed off of the excitement of artists' work, but then renders that kind of work impossible at the university itself. Because I can't do the kind of work, like I couldn't possibly like be like, everybody take your clothes off and let's roll over each other. Which is like what I do in my work, and that's what happens in my rehearsal. In the U.S., it's like, I mean, you can do it in Europe, and I have. But in the U.S., it's like there's so much like, what? You can't be radical. You can be radical in pedagogical approach to an extent, but there's always feels like there's always a thing that's kind of weighing down upon you. And so again, I think the work for artists who have to engage with certain institutions, and again, this is true when you're looking for funding, this is true when you're working with venues, is like, how do you determine your own path? How do you not let the institution exclusively discipline you out of your own strangeness, which is what your imagination is leading you to?
Rather than limiting you by the box or terms of an institution, I wanted to ask one last question that I've also taken a practice of reframing because of Amar Chabor Smith. as an artist, what is your definition of satisfaction?
I mean, I'm saying this on the stage where we're getting to do our incredible show, and you know, if you've seen it already or if you're about to see it, you know, these 4 unbelievable performers inside of work that also was created by incredible collaborators. I mean, I'm good. Like, I'm okay, really. I mean, I'm a little complaint monster, but like in my heart, I feel really good. I'm doing the work I want to do, and I'm getting the opportunities to get to do it. So I feel like amazing about that. I still see the vast array of fucked up things. I can't not see it, and I would be foolish. And I don't like to walk with like false hope. I hate that, or like everything's fine. Like I hate that. I think it's so irresponsible to talk like that or be like that. But I think you can hold both things. You can be like, the world is trash, and my world is beautiful. And I feel like, so, you know, the responses we're getting from people writing me messages, the kinds of things people say to me right after the show, it's like, it's gold for me. I'm just like stashing it. So that's, I feel I'm fine.
Friends, Miguel Gutierrez.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for a different kind of conversation, an improvisation on arts administration, if you will, please help me join Fox Whitney and Jody Kuehner, aka Cherdonna, from here in Seattle.
What if you could take all the time you needed? What if there are no words to describe this? How much of this is improvised? What do you really want to ask me? When did you stop calling yourself an artist? When did you start calling yourself an administrator? When did you stop doubting yourself? When did you realize you didn't know the answer? Who inspires you? If money wasn't an issue, what kind of art would you make? If space wasn't an issue, what kind of art would you make? If time didn't exist, what kind of art would you make? If white supremacy wasn't an issue, what kind of art would you make? If gender didn't exist, what kind of art would you make? If you knew that you would be deported, what kind of art would you make? If you knew you'd be arrested, what kind of art would you make? Any other questions? Any other questions? What if transition is any other questions? Any other questions? Any other questions? You had a question?
When you're old, what's old? What kind of art will you make?
Any other questions? Any other questions?
Who do you make art for?
Any other questions? Any other questions? Any answers? Are there any answers? Are there any answers? Any other questions?
I was thinking about this one time when I had to creatively arts administrate a presenter that told me that my work was too nice.
That sounds like an answer. Is that an answer?
It was a question for me.
Any other question?
What's nice? That was the question.
What kind of art would you make if you didn't have to be nice? Are there any other questions? We have like 10 minutes left. Do you like durational performance? Do you like microphones? Do you like questions? Do you like the answers? Do you like simultaneous answers? So what's the question? What's the question?
Why not?
What's the question?
Why not?
What's the question?
Why not?
That was for me, thank you. Any more answers, Jody?
had to creatively arts administrate another moment when I applied for a residency and they said I was the forefront runner. And then I didn't get it and I just got feedback and they said, oh, we didn't think you needed it enough. And so I was like, what's enough? How do I show them what enough is?
Any other questions? Any other questions? How much of this is improvised? Are you sure? Do you think the body really keeps the score? What if there are no words to describe this? Do you think there are words to describe this? How much of this is improvised? Do you think the body really keeps the score? What if you think there are words to describe this? How much of this is improvised? Do you think the body really keeps the score? What do you hear that? Words to describe this. How much of this is improvised? Do you think the body really keeps the score? Do you hear that? Are you listening? Are you watching? Are you paying attention? Are you feeling anything? Can you feel me? Do you know how amazing you are? Are you feeling creative? Are you feeling sleepy on a Saturday afternoon? Thank you. Why don't we just take a breather? had what you need? What if you do what you say? What do you need right now? What if you need what you have? What if you say what you do? What if you had what you need? What if you do what you say? What do you need right now? What if you need what you have? What if you say what you do? What if you had what you need? What if you do what you say? What do you need right now? What if you need what you have? What if you say what you do? What if you had what you need? What if you do what you say? What do you need right now? Any more questions? What if you need what you have? What if you say what you do? Any more questions? What if you had what you need? Any more questions? What if you do what you say? What do you need? Thanks. It was great talking to you, Jody.
Thank you, Jody and Fox. And yet, for another different kind of conversation, I would like your help joining me in welcoming from Seattle, Byron O. Yong, Ali Swirsky, from Tacoma, Bill Kunz, and myself for a conversation about arts in higher education.
Cool. So this is a quartet. This is something I often use in class because I read somewhere that when people discuss in fours, it's actually really effective. So we're going to try this. Some of the people I know, some I'm meeting for the first time. My name is Byron O. Yong. I'm a composer, and I've been affiliated with this with NCCAkron as a thought partner, thanks to Tanya. So yeah, who knows what we're going to say? I'm going to pass it to you.
Hi, my name is actually Aaliyah, and I'm actually not from Tacoma, but I'm from Seattle, and I love On the Boards.
Oh, hi, my name is Bill. I am from Tacoma. I teach there. I've never been here before, and this is really cool.
And my name's Christy, and I'm here from Akron, Ohio, and I guess partly responsible for y'all being here, and also love On the Boards. So, yep.
So we are. I mean, I haven't been to On the Boards in a while. I don't know if that's where we're starting, but that's. But there is love for On the Boards. I actually remember this space as Act Theater, and before that it was a dance hall. So there's something about spaces changing.
I love you naming that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of spaces changing, or even that something as physical as the bricks and mortar does not remain the same. I should have also said I'm not a university employee. Yes, the National Center for Choreography is on the University of Akron's campus in what started out as donated space. But I'm really glad to not be a university employee. I find a lot of agency in what I call operating in the cracks of the systems without having to play within the boxes. I don't know, Bill, are you in the cracks, or are you in the center of the system?
I'm struggling in this system. You know, as someone, our campus, University of Washington, Tacoma, we've tried to develop creative curriculum. It's a struggle. A lot of people are very well-meaning, supportive, but it's such a long educational process. You said space, the spaces we need, the things we need to be able to do our work. And I teach video and documentary production. I arrived on the campus at the same time we have two studio artists. 23 years later, we still don't have adequate space for them. And it's a struggle, and and I'm fascinated by the book of how I haven't I just got it today, and to read it to see how we can advocate for what we need on a sustainable basis, because there's so much turnover. We feel like we're making headway, and then the people we're making headway with leave, and you start over, and it's just, yeah, it's a struggle. Sorry.
No, I mean, it's real. And while you named how this space has changed over time, and then you're saying, like, how do you keep a pace with the needs of change? And the time that it takes is much longer than how quickly everything else is changing. That's what I heard.
What I find, well, I'm just going to go off of that is, and something Miguel said about, for artists, we sort of, it's like to get into the university system, it's like on one hand, you've succeeded, you've like got a job that's stable, and on the other hand, you're losing so much. But then inside the system that you're in, and whether, depending on the school, you might not have very much resource. And so it's like, how is that also mirroring what it is just to be in scarcity mentality in the cracks or on the arterial routes? I don't know. That's all.
Cool. Yeah, it's like musical chairs with the mic. So that's very cool. I mean, maybe I'll do this. And thank you for the reminder about what this conversation's about. It's actually about artists in academia. So maybe one thing we should name is where we're at. I'm at Seattle University now. I started in July 2023 as the Director of Arts Leadership. And 7 years, or before that, in 2016, I moved to the University of San Francisco, where I was for 7 years. And that was my first full-time job teaching at a university. The reason why I decided to go into education full-time, coming from being a freelance artist, composer, I'm still introduced in Seattle as a performance artist in some circles, was because my grandparents were educators, and they were also refugees, and so they didn't have buildings, right? And so when I got to University of San Francisco, and faculty and staff and administration were saying, oh, we don't have resources, we don't have this, I'm like, what are you talking about? You have so much, right? And the point of me becoming an educator isn't about that. It's about how do I work with students to pass on and co-learn with them. And so, yeah, and so I think that's been my tension with academia, and maybe that's why I was hired as Director of Arts Leadership, because I think there was something I heard earlier about artists, how we're, thinking in different ways while we're totally present in the current situations we're in. So they need us. And this is something else I heard, like they need you more than you need them. And this was actually talking about performing arts conferences, right? Because artists are always like, what are we doing here? It's like mostly presenters and funders. And then always like, as a queer Asian of color, of color, whatever. But like whenever I would gather with my other like Asian American artists, all of a sudden a photographer would appear, and then we'd end up on the brochure of this conference. So, it's stuff like that. Anyways, and I'm like, no, I think one of the things is University of San Francisco and Seattle U are both Jesuit universities, and I think there's a distinction because I went to UCLA, which is an R1, UW is an R1. Cornish is an arts college. There's a distinction between different colleges. I'll explain Jesuit University.
Explain R1.
Oh, sorry, research university, yeah. Right? And so faculty are hired to do research, not necessarily to teach. Jesuit universities they're educational institutions. There are Jesuits on campus. Jesuits are highly overeducated. Many have multiple PhDs, and they're global. Like, we have Jesuits from all around the world on campus. They provide counsel. Jesuits take a vow of poverty, right? And poverty doesn't mean denying yourself money. What it means is you distribute resources. the second thing is they take a vow of chastity, right? And chastity, you know, some may think it's denying yourself sex. Really what it is being open to being in a relationship with everyone, right? How poverty and chastity manifests itself in the teaching is that poverty is that you're working towards community engagement and the common good, right? And so that's instilled in students. There's an ethic. And then the third one is they take a vow of obedience, right? Which sounds kind of creepy and scary. But what I've learned recently, especially with this managing of Cornish College of the Arts, and you know that's something we may discuss, is that obedience means that I'm not the decision maker in every situation. So I can decide what's happening in the classroom, but with this whole Cornish, you know, Director of Arts Leadership, I don't have decision-making power. So that's fine. I'm going to be obedient to those who do, right?
But I think the challenge is, because I've served in faculty roles. I was the interim director of our program as we became a school. I was a vice chancellor, is how to educate, and so I've struggled with it at both places, how to educate the people who are making those decisions on the needs of things they don't understand. And I think when we hire a science faculty member, it comes with lab, it comes with startup, it comes with all these things. When we hire an artist, it doesn't. And so we always have, it's this ongoing challenge, and that's what I'm reading the book, what I'm looking for is how do we advocate, how do we get those resources so the people who are making those decisions, and as I said, I was very fortunate, the people were very supportive. They had no idea what it would take to teach video in terms of editing equipment, in terms of cameras, in terms of everything, in terms of spaces. And we have that with our theater program, with our arts, everything, and that's the challenge, is educating the people who are making those decisions and allocating those resources to understand something that to them is very different, because a lot of them don't come from the arts. They come from the sciences, they come from history, they come from various fields, and they don't really understand what it takes to teach, to learn in creative areas. And that's the challenge that I faced.
That's interesting. I know I'm talking a lot, and I want to let you know my experience going into USF in 2016, because I did have a lot of colleagues in universities who coached me. And so I negotiated my lab, right? And they bought me a piano. They bought me all this research equipment. Great, halftime remaining. So, and it's because I was like, hey, I'm going into a new environment. I know there are artists who work in this. What should I expect?
And that was one of my challenges. I came out of industry. I was working at Turner Broadcasting, and I was reflecting on Miguel's and some things he was saying. Got out of the industry because my wife and I wanted to have a normal life, or some more control of my life, and I didn't negotiate well. But it's also, and one of the science faculty members I worked very closely with, she's like, you should have negotiated better. It's like, I tried, but they didn't understand. Going to a place where there was no one teaching creative stuff in our school. But yeah, no, it was a mistake on my part, no question.
I think I need you to ask me a question. I mean, what are we, I think I'm sort of like, if we're talking about being an artist in academia, and we're sort of touching on resources at the moment, I don't know what else wants to be said about, there's so much to talk about in this, Well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I have been hearing and getting to work from the cracks or the sidelines of being academic adjacent is two very different operating environments. And so one of the things that often comes up in car thinking harkens to Deborah Hayes' turn your fucking head. So the idea that dancers often will walk into a space and go, okay, what's front? And that might orient the conversation or the rehearsal, but it makes a lot of assumptions about the other opportunities in the room. And what I would offer in arts administration, perhaps this resonates in academia too, there's a lot of front questions, right? Like, okay, what's my tenure check job? Or what is this position? Or what's my course load? Without asking some of the realities of the operating environment or understanding, do they really understand what a creative worker needs in terms of research spaces over time? So, Aaliyah, my question, I think, since you've been at Cornish, would be, how would you describe your experience in that operating environment?
So I think most people know that Cornish has been through this big transition. We lost our space on Capitol Hill. That was our space for 110 years, which is sort of like the historic building where Merce Cunningham was, and John Cage, and Martha Graham. And I don't know, Fox, you said something about transition. Dance is transition. And I think that there's, if dance and art is a part of it, and we talked about space when we first talked about on the boards, is like everything is in transition. A space was one thing and then it will become another thing, and then it's how we occupy it that makes it the thing. So how are we inhabiting the space? And I think something connecting into resource about dancers perhaps is that you give us a space and we're gonna move around. We are gonna make that space, we're gonna activate it, and we'll bring it to life. So it could be anywhere. And I think we see that all over the world, not just in academia. It's like, shit is bad out there, but people are dancing. They are dancing in rubble. They are dancing in beautiful old buildings. And I think academia has a history of like, it's so important. It's so like, the buildings are important, the infrastructure, the campuses, they're so beautiful. And so how are we, I guess in terms of Cornish, I have no idea where I was just going with that idea, but there, I think the thing that I continue to come back to as I'm trying to track my thinking is that academia and these systems, all of these systems of like white supremacy, patriarchy, they want us to be really fast. They want us to know a lot, to be really fast, to make a lot of spreadsheets, to have all the answers, and basically it's a performance of knowing constantly. And I think artistic practice, for me, is a performance of unknowing and a performance of slowing down and waiting for hours and hours and hours to see if one movement will come out of my body. And that's my biggest thing with my current position at Cornish is I'm asked to do every single job, from cleaning the studio to hiring faculty to producing every single show that we did this last year. It's unrealistic, it's unhealthy, it's literally not okay. And the only way through it is to just be in any space, in the bathroom, in the office, in the dance studio, and just wait. And so my answer always to that sort of motor, that like ongoing ask to be constant, to know, to have all the answers, to interface with every part of the system in academia is to pause and to be willing inside of that system to be seen of, I don't know what the fuck is going on. When you talk about this credit and that thing and this like committee, I'm just like, you guys keep performing and I'm gonna just be here. And then things will still get done. And another thing that when I was thinking about what I was gonna say, this was one thing I wanted to say was like, there's something about these systems that make you feel like everything is urgent and needs to happen immediately. And so I will ask myself like, is that actually urgent? And rarely is it urgent. If my daughter is running and like a car's about to hit her, that is urgent. But pretty much like nothing that's being asked of me inside academia is urgent. And then it's, I think also when I bring my artist self in, it's like, we're looking for meaning, we're looking for what matters. and we're looking for purpose and to have connection and to communicate something. And the motor of academia is not about connection, but we can find that inside a moment with your colleague, in the classroom. The way I start leading a meeting is like in silence, and we just take 3 breaths, and I probably just made the agenda 2 minutes before and flailed my way through it, and then I pretend like I know what's going on. That's what happens.
I love that. Yes. I mean, there's so much inside of that, too, that you reminded me watching the conversation with Jody and Fox, the moment of stillness and rest. And then when Jody got up again and continued, I was like, that's what artists do, is we know how to try something, and if it doesn't take off, we know how to begin again. We know how to keep going, which might have a different speed, is what I'm hearing that you say. And I love how well you spoke of how your artistic practices are used when you also have this official job and made it, quote unquote, in academia. And I think that's been one of the challenges, whether you choose to work in a university or you're trying to run a dance company or some sort of project, is a lot of times what I witness is artists feel, maybe it's the shoulding that comes from the rest of society, that they're like, oh, okay, how do I run a board meeting? I was like, well, you know how to run a rehearsal. It's just a different cast. And so why have we sort of divorced our artistic selves that we've spent so many years honing from being able to do the other things? We have the tools that we need. And maybe to your point too, like that they need us more than we need them, and to stand in that power.
Great, we get the 1 minute remaining sign, which means I do a 1 minute wrap up. You can see how this conversation is ongoing. My wrap up is to understand whatever system we're in, right? Whether it's whatever type of university or college it is, and know these are wealthy places, wealth in a lot of different ways: money, resources, buildings. Hello, beautiful campuses with buildings. The other thing I heard is unlearning, right? A lot of learning is also unlearning. Like there are assumptions, habits, whatever that students, administrators, faculty bring in, and part of that is unlearning. I also hear the rat race. Like we don't enter academia to enter a rat race. We enter for our curiosity, for continued growth and learning. And so one of the things that, actually I'm part of this strategic planning thing at UC Riverside. They have an arts research institute, and they're like, could you please come give us a time management workshop? And all I did was, I was like, yeah, all we need to do is enter tree time, right? Because you're surrounded by redwoods. And how often do you hang out with the redwoods, right? And so as artists, we have the creativity, we have the innovative thinking, and let's continue to, right, enter tree time, not make things so urgent, and we'll have the learning and unlearning. Cool, I'm gonna transition back to you.
Thank you, Byron. How about a round of applause for Byron, Bill, and Aaliyah? Thank you all. And then for our final official reading, I am very pleased to welcome Seattle's own Tanya Lockyer.
I did not pay day to be here today.
Amazing.
All right. What does one say after so much? That was a lot of food for thought. And it made me think about when Christy asked me to be the editor of this book, it was 3 years of my life gathering stories, curating, and because most of them were commissioned, a lot of folks had not written before. So it was really quite an intimate process, which I really valued. But it wasn't my plan to work on this book. And the reason I finally said yes is I realized that it was an opportunity to tell the story and provide evidence of the fact that artists are creating so many institutions and systems that actually thrive, and that artists should be listened to, as you said, listen to us, you know, that the work is happening and it has happened and people forget about the work. Or strangely, when you're an artist your whole life and next thing you find yourself at the helm of an arts organization, people start to call you an administrator. I can just say that I've always been an artist. I remember I'm gonna wait till someone calls me an artist before I actually call myself that. I was 2 years in a company in Canada, performing all over the country, and finally someone said, wow, that was art, what you just made. But that's kind of bullshit, right? Because we're born with this understanding, this love, this compulsion that we know what we do matters, and yet we can find ourselves in systems that say, no, it doesn't actually matter. We don't actually value what you bring. We can say we go to universities and what we say should be listened to, but so often it isn't. How do we provide the stories? How do we provide the evidence? How do we show up and say, no, actually, listen to us? There's real value in what we're actually bringing. I know what it's like to make art and be afraid you're going to be deported. That was the first 21 years of my life in this country. I don't ever come out and say that. But I think that vulnerability that people are feeling is real, and it's part of being an artist, right? We're always vulnerable, and we're always having to change and transform and adapt. And that's what some of us do really well. And I think the reason why I decided to run an organization and work on a book like this is because not everybody does it as well as those of us up here do it. I opened my essay, which I hope you'll read, that I got to read in town hall about Seattle. It opens with actually someone I cared about very much, was a very gifted artist who died because he couldn't afford his insulin. I have watched many gifted people, really talented people, fall through the cracks. And I think that's why, at a certain point, I shifted my work a little bit from what I had to say or the dances I wanted to make to our field, because people do fall through the cracks, and they need to be listened to. So I'm actually going to read, and this was Christy's idea, so thank you, Christy, from Rashawn Mitchell's essay, which is about leaving academia. Such a beautiful writer, such a beautiful artist. I got to be his thought partner. I want to thank, before I do this, Aaliyah. I get to be in those meetings that Aaliyah facilitates. They're beautiful, amazing work happens. Thank you. I get to work with Byron, whose integrity and values guide everything he does. Thank you. Jody, Fox, for when I left Velocity, being an ally, being there, you've always inspired me, and you continue to, and I just can't thank you enough for what you shared today. And Miguel, you were the first artist I ever presented. Thank you for forgiving me for not knowing anything about what I was doing. It was a shit show. But also, Miguel asked me to do something called Freedom of Information. I had the opportunity to move nonstop for 24 hours while blindfolded and earplugged, and it was a life-changing experience. I will never forget it, and I cannot thank you enough. It's changed every cell in my body, and that's what art can do. So, thank you, Rashawn Mitchell, for the honor of letting me read your essay. It's the last essay in the book. I like to think that I experiment with rearranging time. Of course, access to time is a privilege. Here at an artist residency, nestled on a mountain in Joshua Tree, the desert landscape gives a cue to perform a kind of timed waiting. The sky is vast and the sun does not sway from the relentless path. When the sun is directly above, it's best to stop and take a nap. When the water bottle is half empty, it's time to return home. Hot noon here is chilly, 3 p.m. in New York. As I wait here, the Roach's joyful tune, Quitting Time, plays like a confession or a taunt or a 1970s premonition. In 2021, I quit my job as a professor in an academic institution after 9 years. Makes me wonder where the tiny toy cars on the distant asphalt are going. I imagine one in every 3 is driven by quitters, relocating to a less populated area. Each car rolling by carries its own microclimate thanks to the technology of air conditioning. The noisy engines provide a bit of a background basis to this twangy song. Now is the hour of quitting. Twilight paints the town. Old industrial skyline, now the sun goes down. The artist academic professional role wasn't sustainable for me. And even though I had more opportunities than some, the fact is it didn't quite work, underscores a reality that artists aren't really supported in our field. This is not a new story. Other colleges and friends much older than I have shared similar tales. But the great resignation of 2021 is the climax of a decade-long trend of workers leaving their jobs. And as a person who isn't inclined to join large groups, I feel a fraught sense of belonging. I prefer to think of myself as an outsider, a loner, a free spirit, so it hurts my ego to know that I'm part of something so massive. Accumulation registers as truth over time, though. Now I proudly belong to a flock of quitters who left for various reasons, one of which is the belief that not working is better than overworking. So let me be clear. Quitting was not the plan. The plan in place was perfectly good. Retirement plan, steady growth, climb the ladder, accumulative knowledge. Quitting my job was not easy. I had been there for 9 years. I had relationships with people. My partner and I relied on that income, but the plan was too productive, too populated, too industrial, too greedy, too hummingbird time, not enough caterpillar time. It came with a kind of mincing of life. I've identified at least 3 weapons against the tyranny of time: foresight, hindsight, and improvisation. Did the artist Noah Porfoy have the foresight to understand that his land art, erected over decades in a plot of land in Joshua Tree, would decay under the harsh treatment of the desert elements in the most beautiful and heartbreaking way? Did he understand that this would take many years, and in the meantime, his work would always be in transition? Foresight told me to decrease responsibilities and redefine professionalism as an imperfect moving target. Foresight told me to prioritize maintenance, reflection, to trust in my ability to facilitate change. The actual decision to quit was an improvisation. I dropped the ball. Now I practice dropping things deliberately. Things that break, things that make sounds, heavy things and things that fall slowly. I drop my weight into the ground. I drop friends off at the bus stop. I drop hints. Dropping things returns my ability to act on impulse. I'm trying to keep the practice moving, lest I slide into the quicksand of sediments to get seduced by the allure of expertise. I switch between drawing amateur architectural renderings, constructing poorly made objects, designing on intuition, moving by myself, rearranging my furniture, dancing for the wind, biking without spandex, swinging with foggy goggles, gardening without tools, growing things I forgot I planted, nurturing a collection of junk. In other words, a life. Art is life, not art imitating life. Just because of time, I don't even know how much time I have, I'm going to come to the end. Not enough people have flown the coop. Everyone should quit their job. We should all gather in the desert or the forest or on the shores and start anew without technology. Wait, we can't really do that, I understand. There would be chaos and vulnerable people would suffer. So we just quit a little bit inside each day. Quit caring, quit dreaming, quit hugging, we quit dancing. Instead, we should quit exploiting people. We should quit trying to get rich. We should quit trying to be seen and celebrated for trying to get rich. We should quit fossil fuels. We should quit killing black people. We should quit war. But these are obvious. We should also quit buying shit. Quit wasting shit. Quit believing shit. Quit dumping our shit in other people's backyards. Who knows? We might have time for other things. Time for nothing, time for resting, time for being, time for shuffling our feet in the sand, time for listening, time for wandering, time to sit in front of the fire, time to notice the first star in the sky, time to watch the watermelon grow fat, to eat it and let the juices drip all over your chin. We might have more time for time-based art. So I just wanted to make sure I made time for also one of his beautiful experiments. I had this sort of eureka one day. I was like, I want there to be prompts or things people can try at home. And we had a sort of a collective email loop, and we decided to call these administrative experiments. But Rashawn's experiment number 2 is drop the ball. Drop what you're doing. Break the self-invented rule. Cut ties. End of the line. You'll thank yourself later. We're all holding on to something or many things. But let's imagine that guilt or shame or responsibility have no dominion here. Let's question the most fundamental assumption, the thing that everything else orbits around. And that's a tall order. It can be counterintuitive, but drop it. It can be as difficult as dropping a negative thought or as easy as dropping a household chore midway in order to really listen to a loved one. Don't plan that you're going to drop it. Just make the decision right now and do it. And when you do it, just say, drop, out loud. I guess it's kind of like waiting. Well, thank you very much. It's been an honor to work on this book, to have like 2 book events for this book in Seattle has been really, really amazing. And I just love that the conversation keeps continuing. May they continue, and thank you.
I mean, how could we not close with Tanya? Thank you so much. Special additional thanks to Megan and the team here on the boards. Thank you for opening up your doors to us. We promised we would get out in time to prepare for Miguel's show tonight. Thank you also to the Mellon Foundation, who made this book possible and the Creative Admin Research Program possible. I like to point out everyone got paid to write their essay in the book, which is something else in academic publishing because they presume that you have to publish or perish. That's an actual saying. So they're like, oh, they'll be fine if they just get 2 copies of the book. That is not compensation. So we were very proud to be able to pay people for their work and their labor, and so grateful to count on their contributions. And then also a thank you to the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, without whom the seed capital that started the National Center for Choreography just 9 years ago would not have happened. And so we're very grateful for that as well. And thank you to Elliott Bay Books. We love to connect with local bookstores, and they are here in the lobby. They carry the books year-round in their fabulous dance section I hear about, but they also brought copies today. So if you don't already have a copy of the book yourself, you don't have to go home empty-handed. So thank you very much. Have a great Saturday, y'all.